Time to clean up my shelves. Again. Greetings, my name is Nina. Welcome back to my channel. I came across a video from one of my favorite YouTubers where she cleaned up her shelves. It was an unhaul video. And then I realized that I needed to get rid of some books too. I either didn't like them or maybe I read them, like them, but then decided that I will not read them again, or failed to read them, or I lost interest and they are simply taking up space. Okay, so here's 1, 2, and even 3 piles of books that I'm going to donate to the library. So there is a library here in Tbilisi where I took all the books, and they granted me 3 months of free usage, and I took home The Hunger Games, so I'm going to read The Hunger Games. Yeah. Oh, I just realized that the microphone was off. Here, let me fix that. I ordered this stick from Temu, and this is how the microphone looks now. I do need to keep the microphone on a distance because when it's too close, it's going to be too loud. Okay, here are the books. Okay, the first 2 books that I grabbed, these exclusive classics, these are books in Russian, and this edition is called Эксклюзивная классика, Exclusive Classics. So I'm getting rid of The Haunted Hotel by Wilkie Collins. It was a solid gothic novel, but I'm not going to read it again. Not really. And I'm also getting rid of Little Women. I decided that I'm going to rebuy this book in English and only keep the English copy because I have a history with Little Women. My English tutor, while teaching me English, brought Little Women and we were reading Little Women together. I hated it, to be honest, and I do think that the author was moralizing. But the English version does awake some nostalgia in me, and I'm definitely going to buy the English version, and the Russian version will have to go. I realized that I'm never going to read the book, at least in English. This is Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard. So I have had this book for more than 2 years, and I came to the conclusion that I'm not going to read it. I have the Russian version on my Kindle, and I'm going to read that one. But who knows, maybe I'm going to reconsider this. I usually keep these author's books. I only got rid of one huge series that he wrote. But then I realized that I'm not going to read the book in this particular edition. I do not like it. I have the Russian version on the Kindle and I'm reading the Kindle version and I like it. So I'm definitely getting rid of 11/22/63 by Stephen King. I rushed to buy it because it was quite cheap and it was wrapped, but now I realize that this edition isn't really very good, that there are really cheap copies of English books. So I'm going to read the Kindle version. And I'm definitely going to rebuy the book in a different copy, a better one. I do not really like this edition, so this one has to go. So this author has a lot of fans. People really love him. When people see this book, they're going to be like, what are you doing? Keep him. But I did not really enjoy the book, and I'm definitely not going back not to the author, but this particular book, definitely I'm getting rid of. Guards by Terry Pratchett. Okay, do not get me wrong, I have a lot of his books on my Kindle. I have the entire Witches series on Kindle, and I have 2 Witches books on my shelves. I'm keeping them. But this book, I think, is kinda overrated. I did not really enjoy it that much. The humor was way too specific for me. And I have been keeping this for no reason whatsoever. I realized that this book is simply keeping up space. I forgot to mention that I have Terry Pratchett's, like I said, 2 Witches books, and also another book, The Amazing Morris and His Educated Rodents. I'm definitely keeping that one. However, I think I'm going to buy the Russian version too. I'd rather read the book again in Russian. This one has to go. Even though this is a very nice edition, it's and what's most importantly, inside you have the guide of to Terry Pratchett. You have the map of his books. You come to know which books in which order you have to read. Another Stephen King book that has to go. I did think that I would keep all Stephen King books. That's not going to happen. I'm getting rid of Lizzie's Story because I know for sure that I'm not going to read it again. The premise was very interesting, but the very first half of the book was incredibly boring for me, and I had to force myself to read this book, and first half way too boring for me to engage with this book. So this has to go. The Stephen King series that I got rid of was, of course, The Dark Tower. However, I'm definitely going to rebuy the new editions. I simply did not enjoy the editions that I had. If I encounter a new editions, I'm definitely going to buy them again. So I have had these books since 2014. I've had this book, I've had these two books for 10 years. When I started my journey back to reading, these were among the first books that I got, and I do remember that moment. Yeah. But then I realized that I'm not going to read again the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. This edition has the first two books, and this one has books 3, 4, and 5. I did not finish this because I thought that this was way too boring. I barely remember what happened in these books. I do remember the poetry. Yeah, the horrible poetry. And the rest of the series was way too dull for me. I do not remember what happened. I do remember that in the fourth book, Arthur was in a relationship with this girl named Fenchurch or whatever. That's all that I remember. Not my type of series. However, I kept it because I thought I would revisit it. Not my thing. Sorry. Even though I did think that it was. More Stephen King. I'm definitely getting rid of Cujo because I did not really like it. I hated Ted's mom. And it happened that I knew the spoiler for the end and I could not bring myself to read it. I could not bring myself to finish the book because I knew the spoiler, so this has to go. Okay, this edition also has Cycle of the Werewolf. Haven't read it. I do not even want to. When this author's main series got really popular, I decided to check out his other books, and I got myself two. Well, aside from the main series, I got two his other books. I'm keeping one, and I'm getting rid of this one. I'm getting rid of Tough Voyaging by George R.R. Martin. I read the first two short stories, and to be honest, I do remember that the very first short story of the Adventures of Haviland Tough contained George R.R. Martin's favorite cliche. Spoiler alert. So at the beginning you have a group of people, then the group separates, and the members of the group get killed one by one. Yeah, George really loves it, if you know what I mean. So I made a video about my favorite books and I named The Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin one of my favorite books, and then I realized that that part of the video did not age well. It did not. I was wrong to name it, but nonetheless, Fever Dream is staying. I'm definitely going to keep it. This one has to go. Well, speaking of sci-fi, this isn't the only book that I'm getting rid of. I'm getting rid of Stranger in a Stranger Land by Robert Heinlein. I tried to read it. Didn't go too far. Not my type of sci-fi. The book started out pretty well, but then I did not understand what I was reading. I do really like this edition, even though I prefer hardcovers, but when I started reading this author in English instead of Russian, this was the first book that I bought, and I said that I'm definitely going to buy anything that this author wrote, and this book I'm only getting rid of because I want to replace the edition I'm getting rid of Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle Earth by J.R.R. Tolkien. I collect Tolkien, anything related to him, be it his fiction or non-fiction. It may be his essays or it may be his biography or something. But I do not really like this edition, and I like my Tolkien editions to be bigger. Okay, this isn't the only book whose edition I do not like. I do not really like my edition of Letters of Tolkien, but I'm going to keep that book until I get another copy. And this book I'm getting rid of, and then I'm going to rebuy it in a new edition. Okay, maybe this one I should actually keep. I actually got this book from Book Crossing, but on the other hand, this author is better off to be read in Russian than in English. This is By the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. I actually started reading this book earlier this year, but the thing about Agatha Christie novels that I prefer the Russian translation over the original. So I read And Then There Were None in Russian and English, both of them, and I like the Russian translation better. This book actually has a pretty nice cover. I think I should buy the Russian version. Okay, I planned to read this book in 2023, but then I realized that I'm not going to read it. Well, if you are in Tbilisi, well, there is a shop where you can buy books in English. It's called Prosperous Books. It's on Rustaveli 34. And there, this book was around 50 or 55 lari. And then I found this edition for 5 lari. This is the cheapest book that I ever bought. This edition was actually better that I'm holding in my hands. No, I'm not going to read this. And the book is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I started reading a few times and I understood that I'm not going to read it, at least in English. After all, I'm a native Russian speaker, and for me it's really weird. It's hard to read all these Russian names with English pronunciation. I need to get a Russian translation of this book. You know what? There is one thing I learned about books. Some books are better off in a certain format. Maybe sometimes it's better to read the physical copy, sometimes it's better to read the ebook, sometimes an audiobook, and sometimes it's better to read the book in another language. I need the Russian version of this. Oh, I thought I would enjoy all books by this author, but all of them, except for one, were kinda disappointing for me. This is The Last Summer of Klingzor by Hermann Hesse. After I read Beneath the Wheel, which is one of my favorite books, I decided to read more Hesse, and I got this book along with Gertrude and Damien. But those two books weren't quite for me, and neither was this one, even though I liked this one better. I literally forced myself to read this, and now it's completely gone from my memory for good. I read this book in January this year, and I thought I would be getting books 2 and 3, and I should have gotten them back then. Now I do not really want to read them. The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I have an entire video dedicated to talking about this book. It was a really good book. Really good. One of those good TikTok masterpieces. But still, I'm going to get rid of this because I do not think that I'm going to read this book again. Some people compare this to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. However, you cannot compare these two books just because they feature teenage girls and mysteries. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is so compelling. I have all 3 books. They are staying. I love them very much. This one has to go. And finally, the last book here, it's House Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones in Georgian. The only reason I kept this book was because I really like the edition. I like the cover. It's really nice to hold in hands and to open, but I'm not going to pick it up, and it's simply taking up space. I need to rebuy this book in a different edition. Alright, that's all. These are the books that I'm getting rid of. I'm going to take them sooner or later to the library. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.